Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. My name is Amy Bolduc, and I have a very special guest today. Her name is Amanda Leland. And if you have not heard this name before, Amanda is the executive director of the Environmental Defense Fund. She has many things under her belt, but I'm going to start with that and just welcome you, Amanda. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Amy. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Yay. So can we start by just can you tell us a little bit about the Environmental Defense Fund and like what you guys are doing?
So, Environmental Defense Fund, or EDF, some people know us by the three letters. We are an organization of sort of ambitious pragmatists, is the way to think about it. We are about finding the ways that work for people in the planet, and we have a reputation of sort of coming of leaning in on solutions that are going to be successful and are going to be durable, which is really important, like solutions that last, and that we work with kind of anybody. Anybody who's willing to have a conversation with us, we're going to talk it out. We're going to look for the ways to find a common path forward to solve really, really difficult problems. And we also are an organization that's actually global. A lot of people don't realize that we started in the US, but we're an international organization.
Oh, I didn't realize.
And yeah, and we try to solve like the most intractable problems in the environment. So you can think about climate change or food around the world and agriculture and and fisheries. You can think about water, increasingly a problem, particularly out west. And forest conservation, which has a new twist to it, which is wildfire management and prevention.
Hmm. Hmm.
So these big, hairy challenges, we work to marshal all of our expertise and all of our sort of cultural, political relationships in the different places that we work in order to drive significant changes. One of the probably most well cited aspects of EDF in the last few years has been our work to reduce methane emissions in the oil and gas sector, which sounds very wonky, but is really important because methane is responsible for much of the warming that we're experiencing today. A lot of people don't realize that. And it comes out of infrastructure as oil and gas is being developed. And if you stop the leak, you can stop the emission, and it really has an economic uh, sort of tie to it. We had a satellite circulating the planet, tracking global methane emissions called Methane Sat. So we're very science focused. We are very evidence based. We lean on economic solutions that are going to help people's lives. And we'll kind of work with anybody.
Wow, that sounds really broad.
It is broad. It is broad. And I think most people don't know that EDF got its start over 50 years ago, almost 60 now, um, in the banning of DDT.
Mm.
So EDF's first big success was the rebounding population of bald eagles in the United States because DDT was basically reducing the viability of eggs in birds, in particular birds of prey, osprey, and the bald eagle. And that's why the bald eagle was an endangered species for a long time, but now it's thriving and kind of everywhere again.
Okay. And if I can ask a really obvious question, Amanda, what DDT is that a
Ah, it's a pesticide and it
Thank
was
you.
used for mosquito prevention. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
glad you asked. So back in the, let's say, 60s, like trucks would just go around all the neighborhoods and spray DDT everywhere. And it was the story that inspired Rachel Carson to write Silent Spring. So if you're familiar with sort of the arc of the environmental movement in the US, it was the toxic chemicals, in particular DDT, that was a driver and making like the environmental movement happen.
Hmm. Okay, cool. Thank you for that.
Little
Uh,
history.
well, no, that's really good to know. And so you mentioned Rachel Carson, which I think I commented on a post of yours on Instagram that I think she's got Maine ties, Rachel
She
Carson,
does. She does actually have Maine ties. Yep.
as
She
do
there's
you.
as do I. I am, however, not as nearly as exciting and I don't know, famous as Rachel Carson is, but it is true I do have Maine ties.
Hmm, that's fun. And so, because I know there's a park, there's a Rachel Carson
Carson
Park.
Park.
Yep.
Yes.
And I have friends that visit there often.
Down at it's down in the Pemaquid Peninsula. Yeah.
Hmm.
There may be multiple Rachel Carson parks in Maine, actually, but I know of one down on the Pemaquid Peninsula.
Yeah, I have not been, but I've heard of it for sure. And so your Maine ties, Amanda, you went to school in Maine. Is that when you first went to Maine?
No, I grew up in Massachusetts, so I was, I did the tourist thing up to Maine a lot, and Maine and coastal New Hampshire were kind of our my like family haunts. Um, But my living experience in Maine was I went to grad school at the University of Maine. I was a student in Orono, but we I was based at a marine lab just outside of Damariscotta on the same peninsula, the Pemaquid Peninsula, and on the Damariscotta River. And I got my master's in marine biology at the Darling Marine Center. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. And so on that, and all right, so what happened? Is that I have too many thoughts at the same time. I'm trying to make a really good transition and it's escaping me. But so you're going to school in Maine, everything is fine, it's beautiful, you're in Damariscotta. Um, is that where things started for you?
Well, I mean, my history, my time with the ocean in particular, like, and I was kind of an environmentalist my whole life, so it goes back even further. I grew up on the water, in the South Shore of Massachusetts. My family has been there for a very long time in the sort of the Plymouth Bay area. And my grandfather taught me how to fish, and he taught me how to drive a boat. And if I wasn't on a boat, I was at the beach all summer. I remember this one time that we were out on the boat, kind of far offshore, and the engine died, and we were stuck out there. And it was a beautiful day, but it was hot, hot, hot. And it was Stellwagen Bank. So if you're from New England, you know that Stellwagen is where the whales are. And I jumped in the water and I swam with a pod of humpback whales. And it was, I will never forget that. Um, but the ocean was always kind of part of me. Then I came to terms with the fact that I was kind of an enviro kid. I became an EDF member when I was 13 years old.
Awesome.
So, like, my history with the organization goes back, but my time in Maine was really quintessentially important to my career because as a marine biologist, I was working very closely with fisheries there, in particular the sea urchin fishery.
Uh,
And if you follow the stories of fisheries, the sea urchin fishery in Maine is like a classic example of a boom and bust fishery where it's like it actually was for a brief time the second most valuable fishery in Maine aside from lobster. Most people don't really know that. And everybody went into urchin harvesting. They called it green gold. They could make a lot of money very quickly, but the fishery collapsed in record time.
uh,
And so I came in as a scientist to help try to see if we could reestablish sea urchin populations through the Maine coast because from a time when the fishery was just getting started, you could we have aerial photography looking in sort of the shallow subtidal water and you could see the urchins. They were like you can capture them from planes. They were so abundant. And then, some years pass, and I would scuba dive hours and hours underwater and never see a single one. Like that's how different it became. So my research team to try to see if we could reestablish sea urchin populations also had fishermen on it as research partners. And so I worked really closely with the sea urchin industry in Maine. And there were two really important things that happened in that context. One is, you know, the seeing the crisis of what the crisis of overfishing does. It creates a really tense dynamic, and it creates a lot of distrust. And I would go to these monthly, fishery meetings and like report out on my little science project. And it was intense. It was really, really intense. And I remember hearing from the fishermen, if I don't take the last one, someone else will.
Ooh, that does sound a lot like lobstering, sort of. I mean, how I would
Well,
imagine the lobster
yeah, I mean, the lobster
industry.
fishery has been far more sustainable than the urchin fishery. The urchin fishery, like it was really this, if you think about someone who is saying that out loud, it's sort of the most final statement, which is like there's no path out. The only path is down. And so it's a race to the bottom. And I, at that point, around the country and actually in other parts of the world, back in the early 2000s, like, oh, fisheries were collapsing one after the other. It was a headline story in the news on a regular basis. There were science papers coming out saying we were not going to have any seafood by 2048. It was like it was the one of the most important environmental problems to solve. And I just was like, I don't want to be the person who has to, as the scientist, writes the epitaph
Yeah, right?
in these fisheries. Like, I don't want that to be my job. I want to help solve this problem. And that's when the turning point for me happened in terms of not dedicating my life to science, but instead dedicating my life to
Conservation.
problem
Yeah.
solving and conservation. Yeah.
Okay. And so was that I am do not follow the news as well as I probably should, but so I know that there is a period or I know there are like regulations on I have a friend who's a lobsterman, her husband is
Mhm.
a lobsterman, so
Mhm.
like I know they're not allowed to lobster on Sundays and they have to be more picky about, the size and if they're female or, that type of thing. Is that sort of when that started? And I know you're talking about sea urchin, but it sounds like it was fishing overall that there would be no seafood.
Yeah, so lobster's kind of been a little bit separate from a lot of the other stories
Oh,
on
okay.
fisheries. Yeah, it has a long history of these localized management strategies. They have there's sort of an area-based strategy to it because they have these various zones, and they had the zones in urchins too, but they were big. There were two zones for the whole coast of Maine. Lobster has many zones. They're sort of carved up, and there are rules that are really important, including the V notching. So if somebody catches a gravid female, like a female with eggs, they notch it and then they throw it back, and then that's a protected lobster. That's true for Maine, but that's not true for other places like Massachusetts, actually. Well, it may be changed now, but it wasn't at the time. I don't know all of the current regulations.
Okay.
But there are limits on the numbers of traps, and there are, things like that, that are fishery management schemes to help that are in place to to help to ensure a sustainable lobster fishery. The
Right.
urchins did not really have any regulation until it was too late.
Mm.
It was also super dangerous because it's a diving fishery, and a lot of people got in that didn't even know how to dive. And
Oh
it
my
turns out
gosh.
that, yeah, diving, you have to kind of know what you're doing on diving or you'll die. So there was a lot of safety challenges in that fishery, which is not uncommon in fishing. And they're like, just think about going across to the other side of the United States and the deadliest catch. And there's a reason why it was called that.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's fascinating. So when you were in Maine, you were working on the urchin fishing, sea urchin fishing, and that, and um, okay. So you also, I don't know this for sure, so I'm fishing for this. But so, when you also wrote a book called Sea Change, does that have anything to do with the sea urchin, or is this separate?
So, Sea Change is a book with the primary story is around the change, how red snapper in the Gulf, along the Gulf Coast from Florida to Texas in the United States, how the red snapper fishery became a sustainable fishery. And it's a really important, iconic fishery, and it's a really great success. Not to say it doesn't still have challenges, but it is a complete turnaround situation. And it is used as an example of when you get fisheries right, what like the good things that come from that.
Hmm.
But the story is broader. It's about a whole bunch of fisheries that went through reforms 15-ish years ago in the United States, and how that is catching on in other fisheries around the world. The protagonist of the story is a fisherman named Buddy Gwendon, who fishes out of Galveston, Texas.
Okay.
And he is he's not the hero you expect, right? He's the unexpected hero. I like to talk about the book helps people see that heroes can be hiding in plain sight.
Mm,
Like average people who are just living their lives and having their livelihood and trying to do the right thing and are motivated by the same things that all of us are motivated by, they can be heroes. And I think that's a really empowering way to think about it, because that means that any of your listeners out there
yeah.
are heroes too.
Totally. Yes. I agree. I agree with that. And that's sort of, I want people to feel empowered to take up so that we take up our role in climate change as opposed to feeling overwhelmed by the state of everything. So, hearing about everyone's stories and what everyone is doing gives so many different options because I know if you're like, we have to get rid of the plastic. We have to, wear organic cotton or, whatever. And some of those things are very expensive and they're hard to access, especially now with tariffs and all the things. Um, it can feel overwhelming, but just the fact that we all can do something and we don't know always what that role is yet, but we just have to um, tease that out. And that's sort of my goal here.
I
Uh,
really love that. And I just, one thing that we need to be more supportive of each other, and we need like the whole guilt thing of like, if I do this I should feel this guilt because it's gonna, like, I just don't believe that that's not gonna move us in the right direction. We should be creating the enabling environment in which people can make better choices, but sometimes the choices are what's right in front of you. And that
right.
is like, that's the reality of life. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate how you framed that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I appreciate what you're doing, of course. But so, all right. And so that's, can you, can you just talk a little bit more about the book? Like, is there, I mean, I'm sure you can. You co-wrote this book.
Yes, I co-wrote the book. My co-author is a guy named James Workman, Jamie. I call him Jamie because that's what everybody calls him who knows him, but he's listed on the book as James, and he's an award-winning author. And so he was kind of detailed to this for over a year to really work through. One thing I really like about the book is it brings these insights from history. It goes all the way back to the first fish hook, like the earliest fish hook that has been recorded in human history
Wow.
that has been found so far. I'm sure there's others somewhere, but is from Japan, and really about how the fish hook changes humanity and how people are tied to fishing and tied to seafood. And it comes all the way through to the founding fathers of the United States and how Washington asked Hamilton and Jefferson to basically build out an economic policy because after the American Revolution, the US was broke and
Mm,
they needed revenue, and fishing was a way for
right.
them to get revenue and jobs. And so, like, it really brings in a lot of these historical components at the same time that in the narrative, it arcs through Buddy Gwendon, the fisherman, his whole life and how he starts out, as a kid in Minnesota fishing with his dad, and that's how he loves fishing. And I feel like that's something we can all relate to. I've learned how to fish with my grandfather. It's that sense of community, and that's why people like being on the boats, even if they're fishing and not catching.
Right.
Although I was in Maine last month and I was out with my son catching. We caught some wonderful striped bass and mackerel and cooked them up for dinner. So anyway, it's that. So what the book does is bring together all of these insights and these sort of the common human experience,
Hmm.
and it breaks down a lot of the stereotypes because in fisheries, when the crisis hits, it's commercial fishermen versus recreational fishermen. It's environmentalists versus commercial fishermen. It's regulators versus the fishermen. It's the scientists, or, it's like everybody's picking out a side. And the power of this story in Red Snapper in the Gulf is about how all of this division becomes collaboration and cooperation. And everybody starts to work together when the fundamental incentives in the fishery switch and the fishermen are incentivized and are directly rewarded for conservation.
Right.
And that's the takeaway. Like, if you think about how to solve environmental problems, the big takeaway is the solutions that are going to last are the ones that will directly benefit people's lives as quickly as possible. When you ask people to take pain today and tell them it's going to improve their lives 10 years from now, it's not going to work, right?
Hmm.
It's just too, we operate in the moment in which we're
Right.
living.
Right.
And
Right.
in fisheries, you get an instantaneous reward, and you can if you design for it. And that's true for other environmental challenges too, including climate, I
Hmm.
think.
Right. I mean, one of the things that reminds me of is, I mean, all the states don't have it, but the bottle redemption. You know, you clean up your bottles and you return your bottles and cans and you get cash.
Yes.
And that, and then, even there are people that, just they walk on the roads and they'll pick it up and they'll cash it in and they can, you know, have some cash. And it totally works.
Yeah, it definitely helps clean the trash up, and there's a lot of people tied in terms of their livelihoods to that economic model for sure
Yeah.
in Maine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Um, I I love that. I love that you follow his name is Buddy, you said?
Buddy.
Um, and I love that you talk about the sort of like the oh gosh, what did you call him? The
The unexpected
unexpected
hero.
hero. I wanted to say
Yes.
unplanned, but
Hero hiding in plain sight. Yeah.
yep. That's so fun. I mean, I just love thinking about underdogs and getting their time in the sun. That just it makes me so happy. Um, okay, so that's so Sea Change is the name of the book.
Yes, it is. It's Sea Change, Unlikely Allies in a Success Story of Oceanic Proportions. There's the cover. You can see the cover. It comes out at the end of September officially. It's available to pre-order everywhere. And if somebody actually wants to buy it, they can go to whatever place they like, or they can go to the publisher directly, which is toryhouse.org,
Okay,
um, to buy it.
super. That's great. And so my last question, Amanda, I mean, my last like big major question before I tie things up, but like what was the path like? This is like um so what's the path like to become the executive director of the Environmental Defense Fund? Like that sounds like such a I mean, clearly you started at 13. So, I mean, were they like, you are clearly the longest standing member ever.
That's not a
You should
qualifier. The
deserve
fact that
something. No.
yes, like no. No. And our CEO has been at EDF even longer than me by a lot. So EDF is we have a lot of long haulers. Uh so it's true. 13 is my first experience with EDF, and I was a member. I paid my $30. I got all the information. I gobbled it up. I was a champion for recycling for a long time, so I appreciate your bottle redemption anecdote. And and then I became a staff person at EDF, interestingly. After I left Maine, I kind of on a whim, well, in my last moments in Maine, I kind of on a whim applied for a fellowship in Washington, D.C., and I got it. And it's a pretty prestigious one. It's the Sea Grant Canals Marine Policy Fellowship, and I worked, and shouts out to Maine Sea Grant out there because they sponsored me to do it.
Nice.
Um, uh, I worked in a congressional office for the person on Capitol Hill who was the biggest ocean champion at the time. It was the best possible outcome. And I got to do all kinds of things, including writing, drafting legislation that
Wow.
years later became President Obama's national ocean policy. So I was hired into the job at EDF as part of a coalition of environmental organizations, EDF, NRDC, and Ocean Conservancy at the time, to help advance this concept of needing a national ocean policy and advocating for that. And then quickly, EDF pivoted into a much more focused effort around solving the overfishing crisis in the US. And so I came in as an early, like young career
Yeah, you
person,
did.
and I've had 9 different jobs at EDF over the 21 years that I've been there. I never thought I'd be a lifer anywhere, but my job is different every day, and EDF, in my view, has the most powerful platform for impact in the environmental community, and I get to work on the biggest problems, which is where my what my love is, and I get to do it surrounded by a lot of people who are who are
Right.
just the smartest and most effective I can imagine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. I mean, so in and I'm going off the plan here, but just given I don't want to take this down too much, but like, current events, uh
Yeah.
are things heavy on your end, or are you guys do you guys really try to just like we're just gonna keep going. We're just gonna keep going.
Both. Yeah, both. They're heavy and
Depends
we're
on the
keeping
day.
going. Yes. Yeah, you don't have to go farther than my LinkedIn feed or my yeah, to see or the EDF feeds to see what EDF is up to, which is working to protect and defend all the progress on environmental policy that has been made.
Yeah.
But we're more than that. We're not just that. We are an organization that looks to solve problems. So we do that under any political construct. And there's a ton of opportunity. We work very closely with the private sector. So EDF was kind of the first, and at the time it was very controversial in the 1990s to build partnerships with companies and actually leverage companies for environmental outcomes. Now, today that sounds like, what are you talking about? Of course you have to do that because that's where
Right,
the action is.
right.
But back in the 90s, it was actually quite a big deal. And so we have extraordinary relationships across pretty much all sectors. And we work in food systems with some of the biggest international food companies, but we also work with farmers and ranchers on site and what they're doing in their with their businesses and helping to support them in the transition to practices that are going to be resilient in the face of climate change because turns out we all need to eat.
How about that? Wow.
Um, yeah, so it's hard, but it's also there's a lot of power and empowerment that enables us to make progress even in the face of some very difficult um, sort of even as we have to defend the record of progress on the law, fundamental policy, um, for the last 50 years.
Right. Now, is the funding for EPF threatened at all? Or is it
So EDF is no, we're in this particular moment. I can't say what tomorrow will bring, but in this particular moment, EDF is strong and healthy as an organization. We are not reliant on government funds,
okay?
U.S. government funds, so we are not sort of in the swirl of other NGOs that have got their funding significantly cut. Um, I think, we are also being cautious in how we manage the organization because I think that the economic outlook is rocky. I think
Right.
I can say that without it being political. Um,
I don't think there's anything that's not rocky right now.
People just, yeah, there's just, we can't predict what's going to be tomorrow based on what is today. And so that level of uncertainty does, and it drives us to try to be um, as manage as well as we can
Sure.
in with what we have. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean that's those are all my questions. But so my two regular questions, Amanda, are, what does the word sustainability mean to you?
So sustainability means getting on the path to a better tomorrow with with rewards and results that can happen today, and ensuring that we can have a healthy and safe and vibrant environment for the future for all of us.
I love that. Okay. And then how can people find, follow, get involved with
What we're doing?
yeah.
Yeah. Great question. There's lots of ways. You could become an EDF member. We have 3.5 million members across the United States. So you'd be joining an august force for good. There's other organizations you could join if you're like, if that you might identify more with, like there's Mom's Clean Air Force, which is a very awesome organization that we're associated with, that advocates on health, clean air and sort of reducing toxic chemicals in our lives, which is really important for kids. If you have kids with asthma, Moms is a great place for you to get involved. You can buy the book and read the story and learn more about how and be inspired, frankly. I think that's why we wrote the book, was because it's really about hope and inspiration, even if you might feel starting it that it's in the weeds on fisheries management. We tell a real story. This is a real thing that happened. And maybe last is you can find me on my platforms if you're interested in getting to know me and follow me more. My handles, I don't know them all off the top of my head.
I mean, I can put it in the show notes. That's okay.
Yeah, okay,
Um,
that's perfect.
but she's definitely on Instagram. She's on
I
LinkedIn,
am.
and as
Yes,
is the Environmental Defense Fund.
yes. Yeah.
I can put those, that'll be in the show notes. You don't have to remember.
Okay.
I'm not going to
Okay,
put
good.
that on you. But is there, so that's really all my questions. But if is there any particular thing that I have neglected to bring up that, there's a message that you were like, I really wish that we could have said that. If you have anything, this is a great time to do that.
Um,
How do I pick just one?
no, I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's anything that I should have said that I didn't.
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So y'all, check out the book See Change, SEA Change by Amanda Leland and James. What is
Workman, Jamie
Workman.
Workman, yeah,
James
James Workman.
James Workman.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Mhm.
check that out. Check her out on the socials. That'll be in the show notes. Check out the show notes. And if you feel inclined to join the Environmental Defense Fund and you haven't already, that's
EDF.org. Just go there.
edf.org. That's an easy one. All right.
Hmm.
And if you have kids that are maybe 13 or younger, they can join the EDF and maybe someday be executive director as well.
That's true.
Who
We take
knows?
all ages. Yeah.
Who knows? All right. Thank you so much, Amanda. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Amy. It was lovely to get to spend time with you. And thanks to your listeners for being on the journey.
Yes, yes, absolutely.